In the last movie, we looked at how to insert index entries into your documents. Now it's time to collect all those entries and make our index. The first step is simple. I'm going to deselect everything in my document by pressing Command-Shift-A or Control-Shift-A on Windows. And then I'm going to go to the Index Panel flyout menu and choose Generate Index. Or even simpler, I'll click off that, I can simply click on the Generate Index button, which is the third button at the bottom of the index panel. At first, this dialog box looks pretty simple. We've got the title, which is the text that's going to show up at the top of the index. It'll just say index. The paragraph style that will be applied to that title. The ability to include book documents. Yeah, we want the entire book, and we get that because the book panel is open currently. And the ability to include entries on hidden layers if we want to. No big deal. But I really want to encourage you to click the More Options button. We better move this up so you can see everything. This is kind of crazy. It looks like there's a lot of options here, and I know that it's very tempting to make all of this go away and go back to the fewer options dialog box, but this really is simpler than it looks if you take it one step at a time. Besides, you get a lot of control here that you wouldn't ordinarily have. For example, you can choose nested index entries versus run-in. Nested means each index entry will be on its own paragraph, and that's typically what you see in indexes these days. Run-in indexes mean put all the second-level entries, or third-level entries and so on, in a single paragraph. And so you get these long, almost paragraph type of indexes, and I don't find those very useful, but in some cases people want that. We're just going to use a regular nested index like we see in most documents. Include index section headings means, do you want the alpha characters like A, B, C to be added to the index, or do you want to just leave those out and just have your index entries? We'll leave those in. And if you are going to include those index section headings, the A, B, C, and so on, what do you want to do with the empty ones? Like if there's nothing under J, do you want it to show up or not? Well, I'll leave that out so we don't get those empty ones. Now, which paragraph styles do you want to apply to the index entries for your index? You have 4 levels to choose. In the last movie, we just used level 1 and 2, so 3 and 4 won't matter at all. But you can choose any paragraph style you want for your index entries. By default, InDesign actually makes paragraph styles for you called index level 1, level 2, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and just use those that it'll make for me, and then I can format them later. You can also control the formatting applied to other elements within the index. For example, what paragraph style do you want to apply to those section headings? What character styles do you want applied to all of your page numbers? If you have some sort of special character style you want applied to page numbers, you can choose that there. In a cross-reference, do you want the word see or see also or see herein, whatever you've used, do you want those to have a character style applied to them? And again, by default, InDesign will actually build one for you called index cross-reference, and we'll see in just a moment that's set to italic. In the same vein, what character style do you want applied to the topic within cross-references? So you have a lot of control over the formatting of all of these elements. Same thing with the punctuation it uses. For example, usually following the topic, there's just a space here, regular old space. I'm going to delete that because instead of a space, I would rather have an end space. It's a little bit bigger and just gives me a little bit more room between the topic and the page number. You can also choose what punctuation do you want between each of the page entries. You can also choose what punctuation do you want between the topic entries if you have more than one on a line. In a page range, usually it's an N dash, and that's appropriate, so that's the symbol for an N dash, between the page numbers and between cross-references and so on. Some people like putting a period at the end of every index entry, so you can just type that in here just to say that that's the end of the line. Completely up to you. When you're finished figuring out what you want your index to look like, go ahead and click OK, and InDesign will go through your entire document, or in this case, the entire book, and it will create our index, and it loads it up in our place cursor. Now you get to choose where you want to place this text. In this case, I really should have just made a new document, or at least built the index in the last document of the book, but I'll just put it in here for now, on the last page of the document. It still is loaded up here. I'm still not placing it yet. I better add a new page. So I'll use the Command-Shift-P or Control-Shift-P on Windows. And I'll scroll over here with my Option spacebar or Alt spacebar on Windows so I can see this better. And I'll just click here to add my index. So that's it. It added my index entry, it showed the section markers, but it left out the ones that we didn't already have. We actually did have a J one, so that one was not empty. You can see that if we zoom in here, I'll do a Command 2 or Control 2 on Windows so we can zoom in. We can see that the period is at the end of every one. There's an end space in between each one. The 8th century, just like we saw in the last movie, 8th century was actually sorted under the E instead of elsewhere up here in the 8 section, which doesn't exist, and the number sections. All our index entries have been added, even the cross-references, and you can see that the cross-reference styles have been applied. Let's go ahead and open the character styles panel, and we can see that index cross-reference, that was not in this document before. InDesign actually created that character style and put it in there when we built the index. Of course, later, if something changes in our document and we need to rebuild the index, no big deal. You just go back and click Generate Index again and fill this out one more time. But this time we would say replace the existing index, and it will go ahead and erase the one that's there and replace it with the new one. You know, indexing a document is not fun, but at least with these basic indexing tools and a good dose of patience, you'll be able to create your indexes without too much trouble.